The train's whistle cut through the morning like a promise being broken. Maravale pressed her forehead against the window, watching Wyoming roll past in shades of brown and gray. Endless plains that looked like God had started a painting and given up halfway through. The other passengers had thinned out over the last 2 days, replaced by empty seats and the smell of coal smoke that had worked its way into every fiber of her clothes. At 54, she'd learned that new beginnings rarely announced themselves with trumpets. Usually they arrived tired, uncertain, and smelling like a train car. Her entire life fit into the carpetbag between her feet. 2 dresses, one she was wearing, one she wasn't. Undergarments that had been mended so many times the original fabric was more suggestion than reality. A sewing kit her mother had given her 30 years ago. The only thing she'd managed to keep through 3 failed attempts at making a life that didn't feel like drowning in slow motion. And the letters. 6 of them, tied with string that had once been white. She pulled them out now, even though she'd memorized every word. The paper had gone soft from handling, creased at the folds where she'd opened and closed them so many times the ink had started to blur. Seeking a woman of practical nature for marriage. Must be willing to work. Age and appearance less important than character and capability. Wyoming territory offers opportunities for those strong enough to seize them. Thomas Brennan. That was the name signed at the bottom. She'd answered his advertisement 4 months ago, and his response had been, not warm exactly, but straightforward. Honest, she'd thought. He needed a wife. She needed a place where being 54 and used up wasn't an automatic disqualification from existing. Fair trade, she'd written back. The train lurched, brakes squealing, and Mara's stomach lurched with it. Through the window, she could see buildings now. Wooden structures that looked like they'd been thrown together by men in a hurry to get out of the weather. A water tower, a livery stable, a main street that was more dirt than street. This was it. Smoke Creek Station. Population unknown, probably because nobody had bothered to count, or because the number changed too often to matter. She stood, smoothing down her dress even though it was wrinkled beyond redemption. The other 2 remaining passengers, a drummer with a sample case and a young man who'd been drunk since Kansas, didn't look at her. She'd become invisible somewhere around her 40th birthday, and most days that was fine. Easier to move through the world when people's eyes slid right past you. The platform was weathered wood that creaked under her feet. The air hit her face cold and dry, tasting like dust and distance. A few people milled around. A woman with 2 children, a station agent rolling a mail cart, a cluster of men who looked like they'd been carved from the same hard wood as the buildings. And Thomas Brennan. She knew it was him immediately. Tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 45, with the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile sometime in the previous decade. He stood apart from the others, hat in his hands, eyes scanning the platform with an expression that made Mara's chest tighten. He was looking for someone. Looking for her. She picked up her carpet bag and walked toward him, each step feeling like she was approaching the edge of something she couldn't see the bottom of. "Mr. Brennan?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He turned, looked at her, and his face did something that made every instinct in her body scream, "Run." "You're the one who answered my advertisement?" The question came out flat, like he was clarifying an obvious mistake. "Mara Vale, yes." She set her bag down, straightened her spine. "We've been corresponding for... How old are you?" The question hit like a slap. "I told you in my first letter, 54. "How tall?" She felt her face heat. "I don't... 5 feet, perhaps a bit less." "Mr. Brennan, I don't understand." "I do." He put his hat back on, the gesture final. "This won't work. I need a woman who can pull her weight on a cattle ranch, not someone who looks like a strong wind would snap her in half. You're too small, too old. I was clear about the work involved." The platform seemed to tilt under her feet. "You said age and appearance were less important than..." "I said less important, not unimportant. Ma'am, I don't mean to be harsh, but look at yourself. You think you can help with calving season? Haul water? Manage livestock?" He shook his head. "I'm sorry you came all this way, truly. But I can't marry someone who'd be a burden rather than a help." "I wouldn't be a burden." The words came out too quiet, too desperate. She hated the sound of her own voice. "I can sew, I can cook, I need more than cooking and sewing, Mrs. Vale. I need a partner, not a charity case." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills. "Here, for your trouble." There's a boarding house down the street, run by Mrs. Pritchard. Stay a few nights while you figure out your next step. He held out the money. Mara stared at it. $20. Maybe 25. The price of her dismissal. I don't have a next step, she said quietly. I sold everything to buy the train ticket. This was my next step. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or irritation that she was making this harder than it needed to be. Then I suggest you figure one out quickly. Wyoming's not kind to people without prospects. He pressed the bills into her hand, fingers careful not to touch hers. Good luck, Mrs. Vale. He turned and walked away. Just like that. 30 seconds of conversation and her entire future had evaporated like water on hot stone. Mara stood there, carpetbag at her feet, money crumpling in her fist, watching Thomas Brennan's back disappear into the cluster of buildings that made up Smoke Creek Station. Around her, the platform was emptying. The woman with children had gone. The drunk young man was being helped into a wagon by someone who looked resigned to the task. The station agent had vanished into his office. She was alone. The wind picked up, carrying dust that stung her eyes and made them water. At least that's what she told herself, that it was the dust. The boarding house smelled like boiled cabbage and resignation. Mrs. Pritchard was a large woman with a face like a suspicious bulldog and a voice that could strip paint. She looked Mara up and down with the same measuring expression Thomas Brennan had used, came to roughly the same conclusion, and quoted a price that would eat through the dismissal money in less than a week. In advance, Mrs. Pritchard added, holding out a hand that looked like it had strangled chickens for a living. Mara paid for 3 nights. The room she got in exchange was barely larger than a closet, with a bed that sagged in the middle and a window that overlooked an alley where someone had left a broken wagon wheel to rot. She sat on the edge of the bed, carpetbag beside her, and tried to think. Tried not to think. The arithmetic was simple and brutal. 3 nights at the boarding house, maybe enough left over for a few meals. Then what? There was no money for a train ticket back east. Back to what, anyway? She'd left because there was nothing there. No family, no prospects, no room for a woman her age who couldn't even… She cut that thought off. It didn't matter. What mattered was surviving the next 3 days, then the next 3, then the next. She opened her sewing kit, checking the contents, even though she knew every needle, every spool of thread, every tiny button by heart. The kit had saved her before. Maybe it could again. By evening, Mara had walked every street in Smoke Creek Station. It didn't take long. The town was barely a town, more like a collection of buildings huddled together against the emptiness pressing in from all sides. A general store. A saloon that looked like it had survived at least 2 fires. A blacksmith. A tiny post office. A church that clearly doubled as the schoolhouse. Maybe 24 houses scattered around the edges, ranging from actual structures to glorified shacks. She asked about work at every place that might need sewing done. The general store owner, a thin man with nervous hands, looked at her like she was selling snake oil. Don't get much call for fancy needlework out here, ma'am. Folks make do with what they got. I'm not talking about fancy work, Mara said. Repairs, alterations, practical things. Still, most folks handle their own mending. He turned back to his shelves, conversation over. The saloon owner, a woman named Kate with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that missed nothing, was more direct. I don't need help, but I'll give you some free advice. This town doesn't take kindly to strangers, especially women with no clear purpose. You're the mail-order bride Brennan turned down, aren't you? Word traveled fast in small places. Mara nodded. Thought so. Whole town's talking about it. Some folks think it's funny. Others think you must be running from something, showing up here without prospects. Kate leaned against the bar, voice dropping. Either way, you're already marked as trouble. My advice? Find a way out before winter hits. Trust me on that. But Mara had nowhere to go. So she went back to the boarding house, climbed the stairs to her closet-sized room, and lay awake listening to the wind rattle the window frame. The next day was worse. She tried the church. The minister, Reverend Talbot, young and earnest and clearly overwhelmed by his first frontier posting, listened politely while she explained her skills, her situation, her willingness to work for almost nothing. I appreciate your offer, Mrs. Vale, truly, but the congregation is small and frankly, there's not much money for anything extra. Most folks here are just scraping by themselves. He looked genuinely sorry. I wish I could help. Could you at least mention it during services, that I'm available for sewing work? Yes, of course. Though Sunday service doesn't draw a large crowd. He hesitated. Mrs. Vale, may I ask, do you have anyone back east, family who could? No. The finality of that single word seemed to echo in the small church. Reverend Talbot nodded slowly, the way people do when they've just realized they're looking at someone beyond their ability to help. By the third day, Mara's money was running out faster than she'd calculated. Mrs. Pritchard had a list of extra charges, firewood, hot water, general maintenance, that appeared out of nowhere. The meals at the boarding house were thin soup and bread that tasted like sawdust, but eating anywhere else would drain her funds even faster. She was sitting in the so-called parlor, really just a room with 2 chairs and a dead plant, when she overheard the conversation. 2 women, guests like her, though they had the look of people just passing through, younger, better dressed, discussing the peculiarities of frontier towns with the amused detachment of tourists. Did you hear about that poor woman Brennan rejected? One of them said. The old one? I saw her at the general store yesterday. Honestly, what was she thinking? A woman her age, coming out here for marriage? The speaker laughed, not cruelly exactly, but with the casual thoughtlessness of someone who'd never been desperate. She must be absolutely humiliated. Well, she should be. It's almost indecent, isn't it? Women our age understand when we've aged out of certain opportunities. She should have stayed wherever she came from. Mara stood quietly and walked upstairs. She didn't slam the door to her room. She didn't cry. She sat on the sagging bed and stared at the broken wagon wheel in the alley and felt something inside her chest go very still and very cold. She'd felt this before, the particular kind of nothing that came when the world made it clear you'd overstayed your welcome in the land of the living. When being alive past a certain age, past a certain usefulness, became an imposition on everyone around you. She was too old to marry, too worn to work, too poor to leave, too proud to beg. The arithmetic had finally run out. On the 4th day, Mara woke before dawn and made a decision. She would walk, just walk, out into that endless Wyoming emptiness and keep going until she couldn't anymore. There were worse ways to end a story that had stopped making sense years ago. Cleaner than slowly starving in a boarding house room. More dignified than becoming the town joke, the pitiful old woman everyone whispered about. She dressed carefully, like it mattered, combed her hair, ate the last of the bread she'd saved from yesterday's meal, packed her carpet bag with the few things that held any meaning, the sewing kit, the letters, a photograph of her mother. Mrs. Pritchard was in the kitchen when Mara came downstairs. She looked up, eyes narrowing. You're paid through tonight. I know. Where are you going this early? Out? Something in Mara's voice must have warned her off further questions. Mrs. Pritchard turned back to her stove, and Mara walked out into the gray pre-dawn light. The town was silent. A few lamps burned in windows, but the streets were empty. She walked past the general store, past the saloon, past the church where Reverend Talbot had looked at her with such useless pity. She walked until the buildings fell away behind her. The land opened up, vast and indifferent. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, turning the darkness into shades of gray and pale gold. The air was cold enough to hurt her lungs. Somewhere a bird called out, the sound lonely and sharp. Mara kept walking. She didn't hear the horse until it was close. The sound of hooves made her turn, heart jumping. A rider was approaching from the direction of town. No, not from town, from somewhere off to the east where she could see a line of low hills and what might have been a creek bed. The man was big. That was her first impression. Tall and broad-shouldered, sitting his horse with the easy posture of someone who'd grown up in the saddle. As he got closer, she could make out more details. Dark hair under a worn hat, a face that was weathered but not old, maybe mid-30s. Coat that had seen better years, eyes that were watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He pulled up about 10 feet away. The horse, a roan gelding with intelligent eyes, snorted and shook its head. Ma'am. His voice was deep, rough around the edges like he didn't use it often. You're a fair distance from town. Mara lifted her chin. I'm aware. Planning to go farther? That's my business. He studied her for a long moment. There was something different about the way he looked at her. Not like Thomas Brennan had, measuring and finding her lacking. Not like the women at the boarding house, dismissing her as a curiosity. This man's eyes were careful, thoughtful, like he was working out a puzzle. "You're the woman from the train station," he said finally. The one Brennan turned away. Of course he knew. Everyone knew. "If you've come to offer condolences or advice, you can save your breath." Wasn't planning on either. He shifted in the saddle, glanced at the carpetbag in her hand, the direction she'd been walking. Just seemed odd is all. Woman heading out into empty country at dawn, carrying her belongings. Maybe I like empty country. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Or maybe you're fixing to do something foolish. The presumption of it sparked something in her chest. Anger, maybe. Or just the energy left over from giving up. "What I do is none of your concern, Mr. Calder. Rhett Calder." He touched the brim of his hat. "And you're right, it isn't my concern. But I'm making it my concern anyway." Why? He thought about that. "Because I watched you walk through town yesterday, asking for work at every business that would talk to you. Watched you get turned down or ignored at every single one. Watched you walking like someone trying very hard not to disappear." He leaned forward slightly. "I know what that looks like, Mrs. Vale. Known it my whole life." The use of her name startled her. "How do you—" "Small town. Word gets around." He paused. "You got any place to go?" "No." "Any money left?" "Not enough to matter." "Any plans beyond walking until something happens?" Mara's jaw tightened. "Again, none of your business." "You're right. Here's what is my business. I've got a cabin about 3 miles from here, down by Willow Creek. Nobody's been living in it for near about 2 years. Roof leaks in one corner, but it's sound otherwise. Stove works. Well's good." She stared at him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you can stay there if you want. No rent, no obligations. Just a place to be that isn't a boarding house or the middle of nowhere." It was so unexpected, so out of nowhere, that Mara couldn't process it for a moment. "I don't understand. You don't know me." "Don't need to know you to see you need a place to stay." "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask you to." "Then what do you want?" Rhett Calder looked at her steadily. "Nothing. Maybe some company once in a while. Maybe help with mending, if you're willing. But mainly just nothing. A cabin sitting empty doesn't do anyone any good." Mara felt like she'd stepped into a conversation happening in a language she didn't speak. "Mr. Calder, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity from a stranger. It's not charity. It's common sense. You need shelter. I have shelter sitting unused. That's not charity. That's just making use of what's available." He gathered his reins. "Think about it. Cabin's down by the creek. Follow this path east for about an hour. You'll see it. Door's not locked." "Wait, you're just going to leave? You want me to stand here arguing with you about accepting help?" He almost smiled, just a slight quirk at the corner of his mouth. "Seems less efficient than just telling you where the cabin is and letting you decide." "But You haven't decided yet, I know. That's why I'm leaving. Take your time, Mrs. Vale. Cabin will be there either way." He touched his hat again, a gesture that was becoming familiar. "If you head back to town, stay out of Mrs. Pritchard's way. Woman's meaner than a snake with a toothache." Then he turned his horse and rode off, back toward those low hills and the creek she couldn't quite see. Mara stood there in the growing light, carpetbag in hand, watching him go. A cabin. No rent, no obligations. It was the kind of offer that made no sense. The kind of offer that had traps hidden in it, probably. Men didn't just give women free shelter out of the goodness of their hearts. There was always a cost, always an expectation. Except Rhett Calder had looked at her like she was a person, not a problem, had offered help without the sour taste of pity, had told her where to find shelter and then left, giving her the choice instead of the pressure of his presence. Mara looked back toward town, then east, where the path led toward Willow Creek. She thought about this boarding house room with its sagging bed and view of a broken wagon wheel, thought about Mrs. Pritchard's calculating eyes, thought about walking into emptiness until she couldn't walk anymore, thought about a cabin by a creek. She started walking east. What? The cabin appeared after about an hour, exactly like Rhett Calder had said. It was small, rough-built, sitting in a hollow near a line of willow trees that marked the creek bed. The wood was weathered gray, the windows were small, And yes, one corner of the roof looked like it had seen better days. But the door was solid. The chimney was intact. There was a small porch, just 3 wooden steps and a narrow platform. Mara climbed those steps, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. One room. A stove in the corner, old but clean. A table with 2 mismatched chairs. A bed frame with a thin mattress that had been rolled up and stored. Shelves on one wall, empty except for a few tin plates and cups. A trunk against the far wall, closed. The floor was wood planks, swept clean despite the dust that would naturally accumulate in an empty space. Someone had maintained this place. Recently. She set her carpet bag down, moved to the window. Through the wavy glass, she could see the creek, a thin silver line moving between rocks and bare earth. Beyond it, the land rolled away in shades of brown and gray-green, endless and empty. It was the most beautiful thing she'd seen in years. Mara turned back to the room, taking inventory. The stove would need wood. She'd need water from the creek. The mattress would need airing out. The corner with the leaking roof would need a bucket placed under it when it rained. But it was shelter. Real shelter. A door she could close. A space that was hers, at least for now. She sat down on one of the chairs, it creaked but held, and put her face in her hands. And finally, she cried. Not from sadness, exactly. Not from relief. Just from the sheer overwhelming weight of the past 4 days, the past 4 months, the past 4 years pressing down all at once and then lifting, just slightly, just enough to breathe. When she was done, she wiped her face, stood up, and got to work. By nightfall, she'd made the cabin livable. The mattress was on the bed frame, aired out and covered with one of her dresses as a makeshift sheet. The stove was going, fed with wood she'd found stacked under a tarp behind the cabin. She'd hauled water from the creek in a bucket she'd found on the porch. The tin plates were washed and stacked neatly on the shelves. She had no food. That was a problem for tomorrow. She lay on the bed as darkness settled, listening to the creak and the wind in the willows and the pop and crackle of the fire in the stove. Outside, the Wyoming night pressed down, huge and star-filled and indifferent. But inside, Mara Vale was warm, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she fell asleep without the weight of panic crushing her chest. Tomorrow, she would figure out what came next. Tonight, she had a roof over her head and a choice she'd made herself. That was enough. Morning came too early and too cold. Mara woke to frost on the inside of the windows and her breath visible in the air. The fire in the stove had died sometime in the night, and the chill had crept in through every gap in the walls. She lay under her dress-turned blanket, staring at the rough beams of the ceiling, and took stock. She had shelter. She had water from the creek. She had her sewing kit. She had no food. The arithmetic was simple again, just a different equation. She could probably survive 3 days without eating, maybe 4 if she was careful with the water. After that, her body would start making decisions her mind didn't get a vote on. She sat up, joints protesting. 54 years of living left marks, knees that ached in cold weather, a back that needed convincing every morning, hands that had started to stiffen in ways that scared her more than she wanted to admit. Her skill was in her hands. If those went, she had nothing left to trade. The cabin was dim, gray light seeping through the small windows. She relit the stove using the last of the kindling, then wrapped herself in both dresses and went outside to gather more wood. The morning was brutal. Wind cut across the open land like a knife made of ice, and the sky was the color of old dishwater. The creek burbled along, oblivious to cold, and the willows rattled their bare branches. Mara gathered wood from the stack behind the cabin. Someone had cut a lot of it, more than enough for weeks, and noticed something she'd missed in yesterday's exhausted haze. Fresh axe marks. The wood on top of the pile had been split recently, very recently. She looked around, half expecting to see Rhett Calder watching from somewhere, but the landscape was empty, just wind and grass and distance. Back inside, she fed the stove and tried to think. The cabin had clearly been maintained, probably by Calder himself, which meant he came here, which meant she wasn't as alone as the emptiness suggested. That thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made her nervous. Men didn't just give women free shelter. There was always a price. Always. She'd learned that lesson young and relearned it enough times to have it carved into her bones. The price might not be demanded today or tomorrow, but it would come. And when it did, she'd have to decide if survival was worth paying it. She was washing her face with creek water, cold enough to make her gasp, when she heard the horse again. This time, she was ready. She dried her hands on her skirt and stepped onto the porch as Rhett Calder rode into view, leading a second horse loaded with supplies. He pulled up near the cabin, touching his hat. "Morning, Mr. Calder. Settled in all right?" "Yes, thank you." The words felt strange in her mouth, too formal for the situation. "The cabin is it's more than adequate." He dismounted, started unloading supplies from the pack horse. A sack of something heavy, a bundle wrapped in cloth, a crate that clinked like it held jars. Mara came down the steps. "What are you doing?" "Bringing supplies." "I can see that. Why?" "Figured you'd need food." "Fire's going. That's good." "You find the woodpile?" "Yes, but there's beans in here, some salt pork, coffee, flour, cornmeal. Jar of preserves. Should last you a couple weeks if you're careful." He set the sack on the porch, went back for the bundle. Mara felt her chest tighten. "Mr. Calder, I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because I can't pay for it." "Didn't ask you to." He untied the bundle, revealed fabric, rough cotton, work weight. "Thought you might need cloth for patching or whatever it is you do with sewing." She stared at the fabric. Good quality, practical. Probably cost him real money. "I don't understand what you want from me." Rhett stopped, turned to look at her directly. His eyes were gray, she noticed, the color of creek water under clouds. "What I want is for you to not starve or freeze while living in my cabin. That seem unreasonable to you?" "Yes, actually, it does." "Why?" "Because people don't do things for nothing. There's always a cost." Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, but something that looked like recognition, like he'd heard his own thoughts coming out of someone else's mouth. "You're right. There usually is. So here's my cost. I'd like someone to talk to once in a while. And if you're willing, some help with mending. I've got clothes that need repairs, and I'm terrible at it." "That's all?" "That's all." "No other expectations?" The question hung in the cold air. Rhett's face went very still. "Mrs. Vale, I'm going to say this once, clear as I can. I'm offering you a place to stay because you need one, and I have one sitting empty. I'm bringing you supplies because you need to eat. If you choose to do some sewing for me, fine. If you don't, also fine. What I'm not offering and will never offer is anything that involves you feeling obligated beyond basic human decency. We clear?" The directness of it hit her like a splash of cold water. "We're clear." "Good." He went back to unloading. "There's a rifle in the cabin, in that trunk. Belonged to the man who lived here before. Ammunition's in there too. You know how to shoot?" "A little. Might want to practice. Coyotes sometimes come around, and there's been a mountain lion spotted east of here. Probably won't bother you, but better to be ready." He finished unloading, stacked the supplies on the porch. Then he stood there, like he was trying to figure out what to say next. "Your cabin," Mara said quietly. "The man who lived here before. What happened to him?" "Died 2 winters back. Fever took him fast." Rhett's voice was flat, factual. "Name was Charlie Moss. Good man. Worked for me, helped with the cattle. Lived here because he liked the quiet. And you've been maintaining it since." "Somebody had to. Why not rent it out? Or sell it?" He shrugged. "Didn't need the money. Didn't want strangers on the land. Seemed easier to just keep it ready. In case." "In case what?" "In case someone needed it, I suppose." He gathered the reins of both horses. "I'll be back in a few days. Check how you're doing. If you need anything before then, my place is about 5 miles north. Big house, can't miss it. Anyone in town can point you the right direction." "Mr. Calder?" He paused. "Why are you doing this, really?" He thought about it for a long moment. "Because nobody helped me when I needed it, and I remember what that felt like." He swung up into the saddle. "Stay warm, Mrs. Vale." Then he rode off, leading the pack horse, and Mara was alone again with a porch full of supplies and a head full of questions. She spent the rest of the day organizing. The food went into the cabin, stored carefully in the trunk to keep away from mice. The fabric she examined closely, good, sturdy cotton, the kind that would hold up to hard use. There was thread, too, needles and scissors that looked brand new. He'd thought about what she'd need. actually thought about it. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. By evening, she'd made a stew with beans and salt pork that tasted better than anything she'd eaten in weeks. She sat at the table, eating slowly, and tried to understand the situation she'd landed in. Rhett Calder was either genuinely kind, which seemed unlikely, or playing a longer game than she could see yet. Men who owned property didn't just give things away. Men with resources didn't waste them on used-up women with nothing to offer. Unless they wanted something they weren't saying yet. She finished eating, cleaned the pot and bowl, and sat by the stove as darkness fell. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The corner with the bad roof started dripping, just a little, but she placed a tin cup under it to catch the water. The rifle in the trunk caught her eye. She opened the lid, found it exactly where Calder had said. A Winchester, well-maintained, with a box of ammunition beside it. She lifted it out, checked the mechanism. It worked smoothly. A man who left a woman alone in the wilderness with a loaded rifle wasn't planning to force anything. The thought settled something in her chest. She put the rifle back, closed the trunk, and went to bed. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Wake, build up the fire, haul water, cook something simple. Mara spent hours exploring the area around the cabin. The creek, the willow trees, the rocky outcrop about a quarter-mile west. The land was harsh but not hostile. She saw deer tracks, bird nests in the trees, and once a fox that watched her from a distance before melting away. She practiced with the rifle, shooting at a mark she carved on a dead tree. Her aim was rusty, but improved. The kick still surprised her, left her shoulder sore, but she kept at it, and she sewed. The fabric Rhett had brought was put to use immediately. She made herself proper bedding, rough but warm, patched the holes in her clothes, made curtains for the windows from the leftover scraps. It felt good to work with her hands, to create something useful. On the fourth day, she heard voices. They came from the direction of town. 2 women, walking along the creek path, close enough that their words carried on the wind. Mara stood on the porch, watching them approach. They saw her and stopped, conversation dying. One was middle-aged, thick around the middle, with a face that looked like it had been pickled in vinegar. The other was younger, maybe 30, with sharp features and sharper eyes. The older woman spoke first. "You're the one living in Charlie's cabin." It wasn't a question. Mara nodded. "I am." "We heard Rhett Calder set you up here." The younger woman's voice carried an edge. "That true?" "He offered me the use of the cabin, yes." "Just like that? Out of the goodness of his heart?" "I don't know what his reasons were." The 2 women exchanged looks. The older one stepped closer. "I'm Martha Hendricks. This is my daughter Ruth. We live about 2 miles south of here. Came to see who our new neighbor was." "Mara Vale. The mail-order bride Thomas Brennan rejected." Ruth said it like she was identifying a specimen. "Whole town knows about that." Mara kept her expression neutral. "I'm sure they do." "And now you're living here, alone, with Rhett Calder providing for you." Martha's eyes were calculating. "Folks are talking, Mrs. Vale, about what kind of arrangement you might have with him." The implication was clear. Mara felt her spine straighten. "I don't care what folks are saying. Mr. Calder offered me shelter when I had none. That's the extent of our arrangement." "Is it?" Ruth's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because it looks mighty suspicious. A single woman living on a man's property, accepting his charity. Makes people wonder what she's giving in return." "Then people can wonder all they want. I owe them no explanations." Martha sniffed. "You might think that now, but this is a small community, Mrs. Vale. Reputation matters, and right now, yours is questionable." "My reputation was questionable the moment Thomas Brennan turned me away on a train platform. This changes nothing." "It changes plenty," Ruth said. "Before you were just a rejected old woman, sad but harmless. Now you're something else. Something people don't like." "What people?" Mara's voice was sharper than she intended. "You? Your mother? Or the same people who watched me beg for work and offered nothing?" "We're trying to help you," Martha said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "We're warning you that this situation with Calder won't end well. He's a powerful man in this territory, rich too, though he doesn't show it. Men like that don't do favors without expecting something back. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. You might not get the chance to deal with anything. The town council might decide you're a disruptive influence, might ask you to move on." Mara laughed, surprising herself. Move on to where? With what money? Using what transportation? The two women had no answer for that. They stood there, faces pinched, clearly unsatisfied with how this conversation had gone. Finally, Martha spoke. Suit yourself. But don't say we didn't warn you. She turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. There's a church social next week. You'd be wise not to attend. Your presence would make people uncomfortable. I wasn't planning to attend. Good. Martha and Ruth walked away, heads together, already whispering. Mara watched them go, fury and humiliation burning in equal measure. She went back inside, closed the door harder than necessary, and stood in the middle of the cabin, shaking. They thought she was a whore, or soon would be. In their eyes, accepting shelter made her one. She wanted to scream, or cry, or ride into town and tell every sanctimonious hypocrite exactly what she thought of them. Instead, she sat down and started sewing. Her hands were shaking too much at first, but gradually the familiar motion calmed her. Needle in, thread through, pull tight, over and over. The rhythm of it steadied her breathing, slowed her heart. By the time she finished the repair she was working on, a torn seam on her good dress, the sun was setting, and her anger had cooled into something harder and colder. Let them talk. Let them think what they wanted. She'd survived worse than gossip. 2 days later, Rhett Calder came back. He arrived mid-morning, riding the same roan gelding, leading a pack horse loaded with more supplies. Mara was outside, hanging washing on a line she'd strung between two willow trees. She turned at the sound of hooves, wiping her hands on her apron. Mr. Calder. Mrs. Vale. He dismounted, started unloading. Brought more flour, some sugar. Thought you might want eggs, so there's a dozen wrapped in straw. Careful with those. You didn't need to bring more supplies. Figured you'd be running low on some things. I am, but... She stopped herself. Thank you. He glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. You all right? Fine. You're a terrible liar. Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. I had visitors a few days ago, Martha and Ruth Hendricks. Rhett's jaw tightened. What'd they want? To warn me that my living here was causing talk, to suggest I was trading favors for your generosity. Christ. He set down the crate he was holding with more force than necessary. Those two have nothing better to do than spread poison. They said the town council might ask me to leave. The town council can go to hell. This is my land. They've got no say. They seem to think differently. Rhett turned to face her fully. Listen to me. Smoke Creek Station has a lot of opinions about how things should be done. Most of those opinions are worth less than the breath it takes to speak them. You're living on my property, with my permission. Nobody, not the Hendricks women, not the town council, not anybody, gets to tell you otherwise. That's easy for you to say. You have power here. I have nothing. You have my word that nobody's going to run you off. He paused. And you have more than nothing. You have skills, you have intelligence, you have strength, even if you don't see it yet. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. I know you walked away from a boarding house rather than accept pity. I know you're living alone out here and haven't complained once. I know you've already made this cabin more livable than it's been in 2 years. He gestured at the washing line, the curtains visible through the window, the neat stack of firewood. That takes strength. Mara didn't know what to say. The silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. Finally, Rhett spoke again. I brought something else. Thought you might be able to use it. He pulled a bundle from the pack horse, unwrapped it to reveal clothes. Men's clothes. Shirts, pants, a coat. These need mending. Tears, missing buttons, worn seams. If you're willing to fix them, I'll pay you. Pay me? Fair wage for fair work, same as I'd pay anyone else. She looked at the pile of clothes, then at him. You don't have to invent work for me. I'm not inventing anything. I genuinely need these repaired. I'm just terrible at sewing myself. He set the bundle on the porch. Think about it. No pressure. He finished unloading, then stood there like he was trying to decide something. Mrs. Vale, I'm going to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Are you afraid of me? The directness startled her. Should I be? No, but that's not what I asked. Mara considered. I don't know you well enough to be afraid. I'm cautious. Fair enough. He nodded. If that ever changes, if I ever do anything that makes you uncomfortable or afraid, you take that rifle and you point it at me and you tell me to leave. Understood? You're giving me permission to threaten you with a gun? I'm giving you permission to defend yourself if you need to. Big difference. He mounted his horse, gathered the reins. I'll be back in a week or so, unless you need something sooner. Mr. Calder? She spoke before she could think better of it. Why are you really doing this? He looked at her for a long moment. Because everybody deserves a chance, Mrs. Vale. Even people the world's decided aren't worth the trouble. He touched his hat. Stay well. He rode off, and Mara stood on the porch surrounded by supplies and mending, trying to figure out if she'd just been offered genuine kindness or something more complicated. She brought the bundle of clothes inside, spread them out on the table. The work was real. These weren't clothes someone had torn deliberately to give her something to do. These were garments worn hard by someone who worked harder. Tears in the seams from strain, buttons missing, frayed cuffs and collars. She picked up a shirt, examined the damage. She could fix this, all of it, and maybe, just maybe, she could build something here. Not the life she'd imagined when she answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement, but a life nonetheless. Over the following days, Mara worked on the mending. Her hands remembered skills she'd learned as a girl: invisible stitches, reinforced seams, neat buttonholes. She worked carefully, taking pride in the craftsmanship, even though no one but Rhett Calder would see it. The weather turned colder. Snow came one night, just a dusting, melting by noon. Mara reinforced the corner where the roof leaked, layering tar paper she found in the shed behind the cabin. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. She saw no one. The isolation should have been crushing, but instead it felt like breathing room. No one watching, no one judging, just her and the work and the land. She was boiling coffee one morning when she heard horses, multiple horses. Mara stepped onto the porch, tension crawling up her spine. 3 riders approached, 2 men and a woman, not Rhett Calder. The lead rider was a man in his 40s, well-dressed for the frontier, with a marshal's badge visible on his coat. They pulled up in front of the cabin. The marshal dismounted, the others staying on their horses. Mrs. Mara Vale? Yes, I'm Marshal Pritchett. This is Councilman Davies and his wife. We need to speak with you. Mara's stomach dropped. About what? Mrs. Davies spoke up, her voice hard. About your living arrangement with Rhett Calder. It's inappropriate, Mrs. Vale. A moral concern for the community. I'm living in a cabin, alone. There's nothing immoral about that. You're living on his property, accepting his charity, without the sanctity of marriage or even proper employment. Councilman Davies had a thin, reedy voice. It sets a bad example. An example for who? There's no one out here but me. Marshal Pritchett held up a hand. Mrs. Vale, the town council has voted. You're being asked to vacate this property within 7 days. The world tilted. On what grounds? On the grounds that your presence here violates community standards of decency. That's not a legal reason. It is when the community decides it is. Davies leaned forward in his saddle. We don't want your kind here, a woman alone, living off a man's generosity. No husband, no chaperone. It's indecent. My kind? Mara felt rage building behind her ribs. What kind is that exactly? The kind that causes problems, Mrs. Davies said flatly. The kind that brings shame to a respectable community. I've done nothing shameful. You've accepted charity from a man you're not married to. You live alone in isolation. You refuse to leave when warned. Mrs. Davies's face was stone. That's enough. Marshal Pritchett looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Vale, I'm just enforcing the council's decision. You have 7 days to remove yourself from this property. If you don't, I'll be forced to escort you out. Where exactly am I supposed to go? That's not our concern. Mara looked at the 3 of them, the marshal with his reluctant authority, the councilman with his thin-lipped righteousness, the wife with her cold certainty. She saw exactly what they saw when they looked at her, a problem to be removed, waste to be cleared away. Get off this property, she said quietly. Mrs. Vale, I said get off this property. This is Rhett Calder's land, not yours. You have no right to be here. We have every right, Davies started. You have a made-up decree from a town council that has no legal jurisdiction over private land. Now leave before I get the rifle." Marshal Pritchett's eyes widened. "Ma'am, threatening a marshal is—" "I'm not threatening. I'm telling you to leave private property. That's my right." The three exchanged glances. Finally, Pritchett nodded. "7 days, Mrs. Vale. That's all you get." He mounted up, and the three of them rode off. Mara stood on the porch, shaking with rage and fear in equal measure. 7 days. Then what? Forced removal? Arrest? She went inside, paced the small cabin like a trapped animal. The walls pressed in. The ceiling felt too low. She needed air, space, anything but this feeling of the world crushing down. She was throwing on her coat when she heard another horse. This time it was Rhett Calder, riding fast. He pulled up hard, dust flying, and dismounted before the horse had fully stopped. "I heard," he said, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "Marshall came by my place first, told me what the council decided. I came as fast as I could. They gave me 7 days to leave." "They gave you nothing. This is my land, my property. They can't force you off." "They seemed to think they could." Rhett's face was darker than she'd ever seen it. "The council's overstepping, way overstepping. I'll go to town, straighten this out." "And say what? That they're wrong? They don't care. They've decided I'm a problem, and they want me gone." "Then let them try to make you leave. They'll have to go through me first." Mara looked at him, this tall, quiet man who'd shown her more kindness than anyone had in years. And suddenly, she understood. "That's what this is about, isn't it? Not me. You. They're using me to get at you." Rhett's silence was answer enough. "Why?" she pressed. "What did you do to make them hate you this much?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I didn't come from money, Mrs. Vale. I came from nothing. Built what I have from scratch. Some people in town don't like that. Don't like that I don't play their games, don't kiss their boots, don't pretend they're better than me just because they've been here longer. So they're using me as a weapon. Seems like it." Mara sat down on the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. "Then maybe I should just leave, spare you the trouble." "No." The force of the word made her look up. Rhett sat down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him in the cold air. "You're not leaving because some petty tyrants decided they don't like you living your life. You're not leaving because they're using you to get at me. And you're sure as hell not leaving because you think you're not worth fighting for." "I'm not worth fighting for." "That's bullshit, and you know it." The crude language should have offended her. Instead, it made her want to laugh or cry. She wasn't sure which. "Mr. Calder." Rhett. Just Rhett. Rhett. The name felt strange on her tongue. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you can't fight the whole town for me. It's not worth it." "Let me decide what's worth it." He stood, offered her his hand. "Come with me." "Where?" "My place. We're going to settle this properly." She looked at his hand, rough, calloused, steady. Then she took it and let him pull her to her feet. "What are we going to do?" His smile was sharp as a blade. "We're going to give them something they can't argue with." And Mara, for the first time since stepping off that train, felt something that might have been hope. Rhett's house wasn't a house. It was a statement. Mara saw it from a distance as they rode. A sprawling structure of stone and timber that sat on a rise overlooking miles of grassland. 2 stories, maybe 3 in the center section, with a wide porch that wrapped around the entire front. Outbuildings clustered nearby. Barns, a stable, what looked like a bunkhouse. Corrals held cattle, good stock from what she could see even at this distance. This wasn't the property of a simple ranch hand. This was wealth, real wealth. She pulled her borrowed horse, a gentle mare Rhett had saddled for her, to a stop. "What is this?" Rhett glanced back. "My place." "Your place?" Her voice came out flat. "You said you worked cattle." "I do." "You said you were a cattleman." "I am." "You didn't say you owned half the territory." He turned his horse to face her fully. "Would it have mattered?" "Yes." "No, I don't know." Mara felt something cold spreading through her chest. "You lied to me." "I never lied. I just didn't explain the full extent of my property." "That's the same as lying." "It's not, and you know it." His voice was calm,
which somehow made it worse. I told you I had a cabin you could use. I told you I needed mending done. Both of those things were true. You let me think you were just another ranch worker, someone like me, someone without power. I never said that. You didn't have to say it. You let me believe it. She stared at the house, at the visible evidence of everything he'd hidden. Why? What was the point? Rhett was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. Because the minute people know you have money, they treat you different. They want something from you, or they hate you for having what they don't, or they assume you think you're better than them. I wanted you to see me as just me, not what I own.
Well, congratulations. You succeeded. I saw you as someone honest.
The word tasted bitter. Turns out I was wrong. She turned her horse around. Where are you going? Back to the cabin, to pack. You were right. The council can't force me off your land, but you can, and I'm saving you the trouble. Mara, wait. Don't. She kicked the mare into motion. Don't follow me. Don't bring me supplies. Don't pretend you're helping me when all you've done is play games. It wasn't a game.
Then what was it? She pulled the horse around again, fury overriding caution. You see a pathetic old woman get rejected on a train platform and think, here's someone I can practice charity on. Someone too desperate to question why a stranger's being kind? What was I to you, Rhett? A project. A way to feel good about yourself. You were someone who needed help. I was someone you lied to.
I didn't lie. His jaw was tight. I offered you shelter. I brought you supplies. I paid you fair wage for work. The fact that I own more land than you realize doesn't change any of that. It changes everything. She could feel tears building and hated herself for it. It means every conversation we had was built on you knowing more than me, having more power than me. It means I was never an equal, no matter how much you pretended otherwise. You think owning land makes me better than you? I think it makes you someone who had choices I never had. And I think keeping that from me was a choice too. She turned the mare again, and this time she didn't stop when he called her name. The ride back to the cabin felt longer than the ride out. Mara's hands shook on the reins, and the mare seemed to sense her distress, moving carefully like she was carrying something fragile. The landscape blurred, anger and humiliation mixing until she couldn't separate one from the other. She'd been such a fool. Sitting in that cabin, accepting supplies, thinking she'd found someone who saw her as a person instead of a problem. Meanwhile, Rhett Calder had been one of the richest men in the territory, playing at kindness like it cost him nothing. Because to him, it didn't. The food, the fabric, the cabin itself, all of it was pocket change to someone with a house like that. She'd thought they were equals in some fundamental way. Both people who'd been underestimated, overlooked, judged. But she'd been wrong. He'd had power all along, and he'd hidden it from her. By the time she reached the cabin, the sun was setting and her throat was raw from crying. She dismounted, led the mare to the small lean-to Rhett had built behind the cabin, removed the saddle with shaking hands. The horse nuzzled her shoulder, and Mara pressed her face against the warm neck and tried to remember how to breathe. Inside, the cabin felt different. The curtains she'd made, the mended clothes stacked neatly on the trunk, the smell of coffee and wood smoke. All of it was tainted now. This wasn't her space, it was his. It had always been his. She started packing. Not that she had much to pack. Her carpet bag, the sewing kit, the few pieces of clothing she owned. She worked mechanically, hands moving while her mind spun in circles. Where would she go? Town wouldn't take her. She had no money for a train ticket. The wilderness would kill her inside a week. Maybe that was the point. Maybe this was just a slower version of what she'd planned that morning she'd walked into the emptiness. The arithmetic catching up, just taking a different route. She was folding her spare dress when she heard the horse. Not Rhett's roan, a different animal moving fast. Mara stepped to the window, saw a rider she didn't recognize approaching. A young man, maybe 20, with the look of someone who worked outdoors. He pulled up, dismounted, pulled an envelope from his coat. Mara opened the door before he could knock. Mrs. Vale? Yes. Message from town. Marshal Pritchett asked me to deliver it. He held out the envelope, looking uncomfortable. Said it was urgent. She took it, felt the weight of official paper. Thank you. The young man nodded, mounted up, rode off without another word. Mara closed the door, stared at the envelope. Her name was written across the front in neat script. She opened it with fingers that had started shaking again. The letter inside was short and brutal.
Mrs. Mara Vale, this is official notice that you are in violation of territorial vagrancy laws. As you have no legal employment, no permanent residence, and no means of support, you are hereby ordered to appear before the town council 3 days hence to show cause why you should not be removed from Smoke Creek Station and surrounding territories. Failure to appear will result in immediate arrest and deportation. Marshal J. Pritchett, by order of the Smoke Creek Station Town Council.
Mara read it twice, then a third time. Vagrancy laws. They were using vagrancy laws. She sat down hard on the nearest chair. The paper crumpled in her fist. They'd found a legal way to force her out, not just off Rhett's land, out of the entire territory. And there was nothing she could do about it because they were right. She had no employment, at least not officially. No permanent residence that was legally hers. No money, no family, no ties. She was vagrant. By the letter of the law, she was exactly what they said she was. 3 days. That's all she had. Mara sat in the growing darkness, holding the crumpled notice, and felt the last of her hope drain away. She didn't light the lamp, didn't build up the fire. She just sat there as the cabin grew cold and dark, staring at nothing. The sound of a horse approaching didn't move her. Neither did the knock on the door. "Mara?" Rhett's voice, muffled by the wood. "I know you're in there. I saw the lamp wasn't lit." She didn't answer. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me." "Then you'll be standing there a long time." Silence. Then, "I got the same notice you did. The vagrancy order." That made her stand. She crossed to the door, yanked it open. "How did you—" "Marshall delivered mine about an hour ago. Different wording, same message. They're making sure I know they're serious." He stood on the porch, hat in hands, looking tired. "Can I come in?" "Why should I let you?" "Because we need to talk, and it's cold out here." She stepped aside. He came in, and she closed the door but didn't light the lamp. Let him stand in the darkness like she'd been doing. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "about the house, about not telling you the full extent of what I own. You're right. I should have been straight with you from the start." "But you weren't." "No, I wasn't. Because—" He paused, choosing words. "Because for the first time in 10 years, someone talked to me like I was just a person. Not Rhett Calder, who owns the biggest spread in the territory. Not the man people either want favors from or want to tear down. Just Rhett. And I didn't want to lose that. So you lied. I omitted. There's a difference. Not to me." She crossed her arms. "You had all the power in every interaction we had. You knew it. I didn't. That's not a relationship. That's not even friendship. That's just you playing whatever game rich men play when they're bored." "It wasn't a game." His voice had an edge now. "You think I bring supplies and fix up cabins for entertainment? You think I fight town councils for sport? I think you do whatever you want because you can afford to. And right now, what you want is to win an argument with people who don't like you. I'm just the excuse." The silence that followed was heavy enough to break bones. Finally, Rhett spoke, his voice very controlled. "Is that really what you think? That you're just a tool I'm using?" "What else am I supposed to think?" "You're supposed to think that maybe, just maybe, I gave a damn about someone who was in trouble. That I saw someone the world had thrown away and thought she deserved better. That I offered help because it was the right thing to do, not because I had some ulterior motive. People don't do things without ulterior motives. I do." "Then you're lying to yourself as well as me." Rhett put his hat back on. "Fine. You want to believe the worst of me? Go ahead. But that doesn't change the situation you're in. You've got 3 days before they haul you in front of the council. 3 days to figure out how you're going to prove you're not vagrant." "I can't prove that." "They're right. I have nothing. You have employment. With me. Official employment. That won't work. They'll say it's manufactured, that you're just helping me dodge the law. Then we'll make it ironclad. Legal contract, witnessed, filed with the territorial office. It's still not enough. They'll find another way to force me out. You know they will. Then we give them something they can't argue with." He was looking at her now. She could feel it even in the darkness. "We get married." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mara couldn't breathe. "What?" "We get married. Legal marriage, properly done. That makes you a resident with a permanent home, legal employment, and a husband who can support you.
checks every box on their list. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. We barely know each other. We know each other well enough. You're practical, hardworking, and you don't take nonsense from anyone. I'm stubborn, honest when it counts, and I've got resources you need. That's more than most marriages start with. Mara's head was spinning. This is insane. This is practical. This is you trying to win an argument with the town council by using me as a chess piece. This is me offering you a solution to a problem that will otherwise destroy you. His voice was hard now. In 3 days, they will drag you in front of that council. They will declare you vagrant. They will put you on a train or in a wagon and send you away with nothing. You'll end up in some city with no money, no prospects, no way to survive. Is that what you want? No? Then marry me. I don't want to marry someone who lied to me. I don't want to marry someone who thinks the worst of me at every turn. But here we are. He moved closer, and she could just make out his face in the darkness. This isn't about what we want, Mara. This is about survival. Yours, specifically. I'm offering you a way out. Take it or don't, but decide fast because time's running out. And what do you get out of this arrangement? A wife who can sew, apparently, and someone to argue with since you seem to enjoy that. Despite everything, she almost laughed. Almost. This is crazy, she said quietly. Probably. We'll end up hating each other. Maybe. Or maybe we'll figure it out. What if I say no? Then I'll help you pack and give you enough money to start somewhere else. But Mara, there is no somewhere else. Not really. You know that as well as I do. She did know. The arithmetic was brutal and clear. Marriage or exile. Those were her choices. No, not just her choices. The choices they'd left her. She turned away from him, walked to the window. Outside, stars were starting to appear in the vast Wyoming sky, beautiful and cold and impossibly distant. If I agree, she said slowly, this is a business arrangement, nothing more. Understood. Separate rooms, separate lives, we're partners on paper only. Fine. And if you ever lie to me again about anything, I'm gone. I don't care what it costs me. That's fair. She turned back to face him. Why are you really doing this? Rhett was quiet for a long moment. Because you remind me of myself 20 years ago. Desperate, angry, with the whole world telling you you're not worth the trouble. Someone gave me a chance back then. Probably saved my life. I'm just passing it on. Who helped you? Man named Charlie Moss. He's dead now. Lived in this cabin, actually. The revelation settled something in her chest. The man you told me about. Yeah, he gave me work when nobody else would. Taught me about cattle, about land management, about not letting bastards grind you down. Rhett's voice was soft now. He didn't have much, but what he had, he shared. Told me once that being poor wasn't a sin, but letting poverty make you mean was. I think about that a lot. Mara swallowed hard. Your offer. The marriage. Is it real or are you just trying to manipulate me into accepting? It's real. We can ride to the county seat tomorrow, file the paperwork, have it done by nightfall, legal and binding. And then? Then you come live at the main house. We present ourselves to the council as husband and wife. They'll be furious, but there's nothing they can do. You'll be legal in every way that matters. What about after? When the crisis passes and they lose interest? Then we figure out what comes next. Maybe we stay married. Maybe we dissolve it quietly. But at least you'll have had time to build something. Savings, connections, a real foothold. You won't be starting from nothing. It was too much, too fast, too convenient. But it was also the only option that didn't end with her on a train to nowhere. I need time to think, she said. You've got until morning. We'd need to leave early to make it to the county seat and back before dark. And if I say no, it's the morning? Then I respect your choice and help you however else I can. He moved toward the door, paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. About the house. About not being straight with you. You deserved better. Yeah, Mara said quietly. I did. He left, and she was alone again in the darkness. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the stars wheel overhead and trying to make sense of the impossible choice in front of her. Marry a man she barely knew. A man who'd lied to her, or at least hidden the truth. A man with enough power to crush her if he decided to,
or face the council and certain exile. The arithmetic was cruel, but it was also simple. By the time dawn broke, she'd made her decision. Rhett arrived just after sunrise, leading 2 horses. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Mara stepped onto the porch, carpetbag in hand. "I'll marry you," she said, "but on my terms. We put it in writing, separate households if I want, the right to leave if circumstances change, a fair division of property if we dissolve the marriage. All of it legal and witnessed." Something like relief crossed his face. "Agreed. We can have a lawyer draw it up at the county seat. And one more thing." "What's that?" "You tell me the truth from now on. About everything. No more omissions, no more games. If we're doing this, we do it honestly." "Deal." He offered his hand. She took it, felt the calluses, the strength. "Let's go get married then." The ride to the county seat took most of the day. The landscape rolled past, empty and endless, and neither of them spoke much. What was there to say? They were 2 people making a transaction, solving a problem. Romance had nothing to do with it. The county office was a squat building that smelled like old paper and resignation. The clerk who handled their paperwork was a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every variation of human desperation. "Marriage license," she said flatly. "Names?" "Rhett Calder and Mara Vale." The clerk's eyes sharpened. "The Calder from Smoke Creek?" "That's right." "Heard you owned half the territory out there." She looked at Mara. "And you're the mail-order bride Brennan rejected." "Word travels fast," Mara said. "Always does." The clerk started filling out forms. "This a love match or a business arrangement?" "Does it matter?" Rhett asked. "Not legally, just curious." She pushed papers across the desk. "Sign here, here, and here. You'll need 2 witnesses." They found witnesses in the hallway, a young couple filing a land claim who looked amused by the whole thing. The ceremony, if it could be called that, took less than 5 minutes. The clerk read the legal requirements in a bored voice. They both said, "I do," and that was it. Married. The clerk handed Mara the certificate. "Congratulations, Mrs. Calder. Try not to kill each other before the ink dries." Outside, Rhett helped Mara onto her horse. "How do you feel?" "Like I just signed a contract I don't fully understand." That's marriage for most people. That's not comforting. Wasn't trying to be comforting. Just honest. He swung onto his own horse. "We should get back. Face the council tomorrow with the paperwork." They rode in silence for a while. Then Mara spoke. "Your house, the big one. Do I have to live there?" "Not if you don't want to, but it would help sell the story if you at least stayed there sometimes. I'd rather stay at the cabin." "Even after everything?" "It's the only place that's felt like mine in years. Doesn't matter who owns it legally." Rhett nodded slowly. "Then we'll say you're staying there temporarily, fixing it up or something. That'll buy you time." "Thank you." "For what?" "For not forcing this to be more than it is." He glanced at her. "What is it then?" "A business arrangement between 2 people who needed something from each other." "Is that really all it is?" The question hung in the air. Mara didn't answer, and Rhett didn't push. By the time they reached Smoke Creek Station, stars were emerging and the temperature had dropped. They rode straight to the marshal's office. Pritchett was locking up when they arrived. He turned, saw them, and his face went carefully blank. "Mrs. Vale." "Mr. Calder." "Marshal." Rhett dismounted. "We're here to inform you that Mrs. Vale is no longer in violation of vagrancy laws." "Is that so?" "It is." Mara pulled the marriage certificate from her coat. "As of this afternoon, I'm Mrs. Rhett Calder, legal resident, permanent address, employed as household manager of the Calder property. I believe that addresses all concerns raised in your notice." Pritchett took the certificate, examined it. His jaw tightened. "This is dated today." "Very observant," Rhett said dryly. "Convenient timing." "Legal timing, that's all that matters." The marshal handed the certificate back. "The council won't like this. The council can file a formal objection if they want. But the law's the law, and we've followed it to the letter." Rhett's voice was hard. "My wife is a legal resident. Any attempt to remove her now would be unlawful harassment." "Your wife," Pritchett said the word like it tasted bad. "That was quick." "When you know what you want, why wait?" Mara kept her voice steady. "Is there anything else, Marshal? Or are we free to go?" He stared at them both, then stepped aside. "You're free to go. For now." They rode away from the marshal's office toward Rhett's house. The lights were visible in the distance, warm against the darkness. "They're going to make trouble," Mara said. "Probably." "Was this worth it? Fighting them over someone like me?" Rhett pulled his horse to a stop, turned to look at her. "Someone like you. You keep saying that like you're worth less than other people." "Aren't I?" "No." The word was flat, certain. "You're worth fighting for, Mara, whether you believe it or not." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, and they rode the rest of the way in silence. At the house, Rhett showed her to a guest room, large, well-furnished, with a view of the grasslands. "You can stay here when you need to, or go back to the cabin, whatever you prefer." "Thank you." He paused in the doorway. "We did the right thing today." "Did we?" "I think so. Time will tell." He touched the brim of his hat. "Good night, Mrs. Calder." "Good night." After he left, Mara sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the marriage certificate in her hands. Mrs. Rhett Calder. Legal, binding, real. She'd survived. Again. By selling herself into marriage with a stranger, but she'd survived. Whether that was victory or just another kind of defeat, she wasn't sure yet. But she was still standing, and for now, that would have to be enough. The town learned about the marriage within hours. Mara woke in the unfamiliar bedroom to voices outside, ranch hands talking, the words indistinct but the tone clear enough. News traveled faster than wildfire in small communities, and this news had the added fuel of scandal. The rejected mail-order bride had married the richest man in the territory overnight. People would be talking about nothing else. She dressed in the dim morning light, choosing her better dress, even though it was still worn at the seams. If she was going to face the town as Mrs. Rhett Calder, she'd do it looking like she belonged, even if she didn't feel it. Downstairs, she found Rhett in the kitchen with a woman she didn't recognize, older, gray-haired, with the capable hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime cooking. The woman looked up when Mara entered, eyes sharp and assessing. "So you're the new Mrs. Calder," the woman said. Not hostile, but not warm either. "I am. Mara Vale. Mara Calder, I suppose now." "Helen Porter. I cook and keep house here, have for the past 8 years." She turned back to the stove. "Coffee's hot. Eggs will be ready in a minute. You take yours scrambled or fried?" "I can cook my own." "That wasn't what I asked." "Scrambled then." "Thank you." Rhett was watching this exchange with something that might have been amusement. "Helen runs the house. Best to just let her." "I'm standing right here," Helen said. "Don't talk about me like I'm furniture." She cracked eggs into a pan. "And for the record, I think this whole thing is either the smartest move you've made in years or the dumbest. Haven't decided which yet." "Glad to have your vote of confidence," Rhett said dryly. "You want confidence? Hire a cheerleader. You want someone to tell you the truth? You've got me." Helen slid eggs onto 2 plates, added bacon and bread. "Eat. You've got a full day ahead of you." They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, better than good, and Mara realized she hadn't eaten anything since yesterday morning. Her stomach had been too twisted with nerves to think about food. "The council meets at 10, Rhett said finally. "They'll want to see us. Probably try to find some way to invalidate the marriage." "Can they do that?" "Not legally, but they can make noise, cause problems. We need to be ready." "Ready how?" "United. Whatever they throw at us, we present a solid front. No cracks, no hesitation." Mara set down her fork. "You've done this before. Fought them, I mean." "A few times." "Over what?" He was quiet for a moment. "Water rights, mostly. They wanted to claim sections of my land for public use. Would have cut my access to the creek, made running cattle almost impossible. We fought it out in territorial court. I won, but they've held a grudge ever since. So this really is about you, not me. It's about both of us now. That's what marriage means, even the business kind." He pushed back from the table. "Get ready. We leave in an hour." The ride into town was tense. Mara sat beside Rhett in a wagon. He'd said it looked more proper than arriving on horseback, and tried to ignore the way her stomach churned. She'd faced humiliation before. Rejection, scorn, the casual cruelty of people who saw her as less than human. But this felt different. This felt like walking into an ambush. Smoke Creek Station looked the same as it had 2 weeks ago when she'd first arrived.
Same weathered buildings, same dusty street, same collection of hard-faced people going about their business. But now they were watching. Eyes tracked the wagon as it passed. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. By the time they pulled up in front of the town hall, a building that also served as the general store, a small crowd had gathered. Rhett helped her down from the wagon. His hand was steady on her elbow, and she was grateful for it, even though she hated needing the support. Marshal Pritchett was waiting on the steps. Behind him stood Councilman Davies, Mrs. Davies, and 3 other men Mara didn't recognize. The council, she assumed. They looked exactly like she'd expected. Well-fed, self-important, certain of their own righteousness. Mr. Calder, Mrs. Calder. Pritchett stumbled over her new name. Council's ready for you. I'm sure they are, Rhett said. Inside, the meeting room was cramped and stuffy. A long table dominated the space, with the council seated on one side. 2 chairs had been placed on the other side, facing them like defendants in a trial. Because that's what this was, Mara realized, a trial. They were here to be judged. Councilman Davies spoke first. Mr. Calder, Mrs. Calder, thank you for coming. Didn't seem like we had much choice, Rhett said. You always have choices. Some are simply more prudent than others. Davies folded his hands on the table. We've reviewed the marriage certificate you filed yesterday. It appears to be in order legally. It is in order, period. Nevertheless, the timing raises questions. This marriage occurred remarkably quickly, just hours before the vagrancy hearing was scheduled. One might wonder if it was entered into solely to circumvent the law. Wonder all you want, Mara said. We're married. That's what matters. Mrs. Davies leaned forward. Fraud is a serious accusation, Mrs. Calder. If this council determines that this marriage is a sham designed to evade legal consequences, then the council would be overstepping its authority, Rhett interrupted. You don't have jurisdiction over marriages. That's territorial law, not town ordinance. We have jurisdiction over public morality and community standards. No, you have opinions about public morality. There's a difference. The tension in the room ratcheted up. One of the other councilmen, an older man with a beard that looked like it had never met a comb, cleared his throat. Mr. Calder, no one's questioning your right to marry whomever you choose. But you have to understand how this looks. A woman arrives in town, gets rejected, faces vagrancy charges, and suddenly she's married to the wealthiest landowner in the territory. People talk. People always talk, Mara said, usually about things that aren't their business. It becomes our business when it affects community standards. What standards would those be exactly? The standard that says a woman alone is automatically suspect? The standard that punishes people for being poor? The standard that gives men like you the right to decide who's worthy of basic human dignity? The room went very quiet. Mrs. Davies's face had gone red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? I came here with nothing and got less? This town offered me no help, no work, no hope. Mr. Calder did. So we got married. If that offends your delicate sensibilities, I suggest you examine why a legal marriage between 2 adults bothers you so much. Because it's a mockery, Mrs. Davies spat. You don't love him. He doesn't love you. You're using each other. Most marriages are based on less, Rhett said quietly. Ours is honest about what it is. That's more than I can say for some. The bearded councilman shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should move on. No. Davies stood. This marriage is a transparent attempt to circumvent the law. Mrs. Calder, if that's even really her name now, was facing removal from this community. Instead of accepting that judgment, she found a loophole. That's not honorable. That's not acceptable. What's not acceptable, Rhett said, voice hard as stone, is a town council using vagrancy laws to target someone they don't like. What's not acceptable is treating a woman like garbage because she had the audacity to need help. What's not acceptable is this mockery of justice you're calling a hearing. Mr. Calder, we're done here. My wife and I have answered your questions. The marriage is legal. She's a legal resident. Unless you have actual charges to file, we're leaving. He stood, offered Mara his hand. She took it, stood beside him. This isn't over, Davies said. Yeah, it is. You lost. Accept it with whatever grace you can scrape together. Rhett guided Mara toward the door. You think your money makes you untouchable, Mrs. Davies called after them. "You think you can do whatever you want and face no consequences. But you're wrong. This town won't forget, and neither will we." Rhett paused at the door, looked back. "Good. Don't forget. Remember that you tried to destroy someone for the crime of being desperate, and you failed. Remember that all your power and self-righteousness couldn't crush one woman who'd already survived worse than you could imagine. Remember that the next time you're tempted to mistake cruelty for justice." They walked out into the morning sun. The crowd outside had grown. Mara could feel their eyes, hear the whispers starting up like wind through dry grass. Rhett helped her into the wagon without a word. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and they pulled away from the town hall. Neither spoke until they were clear of town, heading back toward the ranch. Then Mara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "That was brutal," Rhett finished. "Yeah, they're not happy. Will they try again?" "Probably. But they don't have legal ground anymore. Worst they can do now is make social trouble." "Social trouble can be enough to destroy someone." "Not if you don't give them the power." He glanced at her. "You did well in there. Stood your ground." "I was terrified. Didn't show. You looked like you could eat them alive." Despite everything, Mara almost smiled. "I wanted to. I could tell." He turned the wagon onto the road leading back to his property. "Where do you want to go, main house or the cabin?" She didn't even hesitate. "The cabin." "Figured you'd say that." When they reached the cabin by the creek, Rhett helped her down but didn't immediately leave. He stood there looking at the small structure like he was seeing it for the first time. "Charlie built this place," he said quietly. "When I first came to work for him, back when I had nothing, was nobody, he let me sleep in the barn. Said it was until I proved myself. But after the first week, he told me to build a cabin, gave me tools, showed me how, said a man needed a place of his own, even if he was just starting out." "You built this?" "Charlie and me together. Took us a month. I was 19, thought I knew everything, didn't know anything. He was patient, though. Taught me about more than just building. Taught me about dignity." Mara looked at the cabin with new eyes. "That's why you offered it to me." "Partly. Also because it's a good cabin and it was sitting empty. But yeah, partly because Charlie taught me that giving someone a place to start from isn't charity, it's investment." "Investment in what?" "In the possibility that people are more than their worst moments. That everyone deserves a chance to be something other than what circumstance made them." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Mara, about the lie, or the omission, whatever we're calling it. I am sorry. You were right to be angry." "I know I was. But I meant what I said yesterday. This isn't a game to me. You're not a project or a chess piece. You're someone who deserved better than what you got, and I had the means to offer it. That's all." "Is it?" He met her eyes. "What do you want me to say? That I did this purely out of noble intentions? I didn't. I did it partly because it pisses me off when people abuse power, and the council's been doing that for years. I did it partly because fighting them gives me satisfaction, but I also did it because you reminded me of who I used to be, and I couldn't walk away from that." The honesty of it caught her off guard. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "That's the deal, right? No more omissions." "Right." He climbed back into the wagon. "I'll come by in a few days. Bring supplies, check how you're doing, unless you need something sooner." "Rhett?" "Yeah?" "What happens now? With us, I mean. Do we just exist like this? Married on paper, but separate?" He thought about it. "I don't know. Never been married before, business arrangement or otherwise. I figure we make it up as we go. See what works. And if nothing works, then we tried. That's more than most people do." He gathered the reins. "Stay well, Mara." She watched him drive away, then turned to look at the cabin. Her cabin now, in a way it hadn't been before. Not because of ownership, it was still Rhett's land, but because she'd fought for the right to be here. Had stood in front of that council and refused to be moved. That meant something. Inside, everything was as she'd left it. The mended clothes, the curtains, the neat stack of firewood. She added more wood to the stove, put coffee on to boil, and sat at the table trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. She was married. Legally, officially married. To a man she barely knew, who'd lied to her, who fought his battles using her as ammunition. But also to a man who'd given her shelter when she had none. Who'd stood beside her against people with actual power. Who'd offered her not just survival, but dignity. The coffee boiled over, hissing on the stove. Mara jumped up, moved the pot, wiped up the mess. Her hands were shaking. She'd survived again. Found another way through when all paths seemed closed. But for how long? The council had made their position clear. They wouldn't forget. And neither would the town. She was marked now, permanently, as the woman who'd trapped Rhett Calder into marriage to escape punishment. The gossip would be vicious, the social consequences real. But she was still here, still breathing, still fighting. That would have to be enough. The next few days were strange. Mara stayed at the cabin, keeping to herself, working on the mending Rhett had brought her. She made the stitches perfect, reinforcing every weak point, replacing buttons with ones she carved from spare wood. The work was meditative, gave her hands something to do while her mind churned. She saw no one. The isolation was complete, almost oppressive. But it was also safe. No one could judge her if no one could see her. On the fourth day, Helen Porter arrived. Mara heard the wagon before she saw it. She stepped onto the porch, tension coiling in her shoulders, and watched as Helen pulled up in a small cart loaded with supplies. "Mrs. Calder," Helen said, climbing down with the practiced ease of someone who'd been doing it for decades. "Helen, I didn't expect... Rhett asked me to bring supplies. Also wanted me to check on you. Make sure you hadn't done something foolish like starve yourself out of stubbornness." "I'm fine." "You look thin." "I've always been thin." "You look thinner." Helen started unloading supplies: flour, sugar, eggs, preserved vegetables, a wrapped package that smelled like fresh bread. "You need to eat more. Wyoming winters are brutal, and you don't have enough meat on your bones to survive one." "I appreciate the concern. It's not concern, it's observation. You want to live through winter in this cabin, you need to build up some reserves." Helen carried supplies onto the porch, then stopped and looked at Mara directly. "Can I speak plainly? Have you been speaking any other way?" A slight smile crossed Helen's face. "Fair point. Here's the plain truth. The town thinks you're a con artist who trapped Rhett into marriage. They think you're using him for his money and will abandon him the second you get what you want." "I know what they think." "Do you know what I think?" "I'm sure you're going to tell me. I think you're either very smart or very desperate. Maybe both. I think Rhett saw something in you that reminded him of himself. And that's a powerful thing for a man like him." Helen set down the last of the supplies. "I also think you're terrified this is all going to fall apart, and you're already planning your exit strategy." The accuracy of it was unsettling. "You don't know me well enough to make that judgment, don't I? I've been watching women survive in hard places for 60 years. I know the look of someone who's been knocked down too many times to fully trust standing up again." Helen's voice softened slightly. "But here's what you need to understand. Rhett doesn't give his loyalty lightly. If he's decided you're worth fighting for, he'll fight. The question is whether you'll let him or if you'll run. The second things get difficult. Why do you care? Because Rhett Calder is the best man I know, and he deserves better than someone who'll use him and disappear. If that's your plan, leave now. Save everyone the heartbreak." Mara felt anger rising. "You think I want this? You think I plan to end up here, married to a stranger, hated by an entire town? I think you want to survive. Nothing wrong with that. But survival isn't the same as living, and Rhett's offering you a chance at the second thing. Question is whether you're brave enough to take it." "Brave?" Mara laughed, bitter. "I'm not brave, I'm just too stubborn to die." "Sometimes that's the same thing." Helen turned to leave, then paused. "Dinner's at 6 at the main house every evening. You're welcome to join. Rhett eats alone most nights, could use the company, but that's your choice." She climbed into the cart and drove away, leaving Mara standing on the porch surrounded by supplies and uncomfortable truths. That evening, Mara stayed at the cabin, and the next evening, and the one after that. But on the fourth evening, as the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping, she found herself saddling the mare and riding toward the main house. She told herself it was just to be polite, to maintain appearances, to show she was taking the marriage seriously, even if it was just business. But as the house came into view, lights warm in the windows, she admitted the real truth. She was lonely. Desperately, achingly lonely. And the thought of another night alone in the cabin felt unbearable. Helen answered her knock, expression neutral. "Dinner's almost ready. Rhett's in the study." The house was warm, smelled like cooking meat and fresh bread. Mara followed Helen's directions to the study, found Rhett at a desk covered in papers, a lamp casting harsh light across his face. He looked up when she entered, surprise clear in his expression. Mara, Helen said dinner was at 6. It is. I just didn't expect you to come. Neither did I. She stood awkwardly in the doorway. If this is a bad time, no, it's fine. Good, actually. He stood, started clearing papers. Give me a minute to clean this up. What are you working on? Accounts. Trying to figure out winter feed costs. He gestured at the papers. Exciting stuff. Sounds it. They stood there for a moment, two people who were married but strangers, trying to figure out how to occupy the same space. Finally, Rhett spoke. How've you been? At the cabin, I mean. Fine. Helen brought supplies. I know. I asked her to. She also gave me a speech about not using you and running away at the first opportunity. Rhett's jaw tightened. She had no right. She had every right. She's protecting you. I respect that. Still, she shouldn't have... It's fine, Rhett. She's not wrong. I am planning an exit strategy. I'm always planning an exit strategy. That's what you do when you've spent your whole life learning that nothing is permanent. He was quiet for a long moment. What would it take for you to stop planning exits? I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe that's just who I am now. Maybe. Or maybe you just haven't had reason to stay anywhere long enough to find out. He moved toward the door. Come on. Helen gets angry if dinner gets cold. They ate in the dining room, a space far too large for two people, making them look small and isolated at opposite ends of a long table. The food was excellent, but Mara barely tasted it. The weight of everything, the marriage, the conflict with the town, the uncertain future, pressed down until she could barely swallow. This is absurd, she said finally. Rhett looked up. What is? This. Us sitting at opposite ends of a table like strangers at a funeral. If we're going to be married, even just on paper, we should at least be able to have a conversation. What do you want to talk about? I don't know. Anything. Everything. Who are you, Rhett Calder? Really? He set down his fork. What do you want to know? How did you get here? Build all this? Work. Lots of it. Started with nothing, saved everything, bought land when it was cheap, built it up. He paused. And some luck. Charlie taught me about cattle, about reading land. When I had enough saved, I bought my first section, built from there. Why did Charlie help you? Because I was young and stupid and had nowhere else to go. He said later that I reminded him of himself at that age. Alone, angry, trying to prove I was worth something. And are you? Worth something? I've built a profitable ranch, employ 15 people, contribute to the territorial economy. If that's not worth something, I don't know what is. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. He met her eyes. I don't know if I'm worth something as a person. I treat people fairly, pay honest wages, don't cheat or lie more than necessary to survive in business. Is that enough? It's more than most people manage. Maybe. He pushed back from the table. Your turn. Who's Mara Vale? How did you end up answering mail-order bride advertisements? The question hit harder than she'd expected. Because I was 54 and broke, and had no other options. Before that I was married, briefly. My husband died young, fever. We had no children, no property. I tried to make it on my own, doing sewing, but work dried up. I moved, tried again. Same result. Eventually I ended up with nothing and nowhere to go, so I answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement and hoped for the best. And got the worst. Got rejected on a platform in front of strangers. Yes. I'm sorry. Why? You didn't reject me. No, but I lied to you, or hid the truth. Same difference. Mara was quiet for a moment. Why did you really offer me the cabin? The real reason. Rhett looked at her for a long time. Because I saw you walking into nothing that morning, and I knew what you were planning, and I couldn't let it happen, not when I had the means to stop it. The honesty of it stole her breath. You barely knew me. Didn't matter. Some things you don't need to know someone to understand. Desperation looks the same on everyone. So this was pity. No, this was recognition. There's a difference. They sat in silence, the weight of truth settling between them. Finally, Mara spoke. What happens now? With us? What do you want to happen? I don't know. I've never had choices before, just survival or death, and I kept choosing survival.
You have choices now. Do I? Or do I just have a different kind of trap? Rhett stood, walked to the window. Outside, darkness had fallen completely. This isn't a trap, Mara. This is a partnership. Imperfect, complicated, but real. You can leave anytime you want. I'll give you money, help you start somewhere else. But if you stay, I need you to actually be here. Not just physically, but present, engaged, part of this life we're building. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. So we'll figure it out together. He turned to face her. But I need to know, are you staying because you want to, or because you don't see another option? It was the question Helen had asked in different words. The question Mara had been avoiding since the moment she said, I do, in that county office. I don't know, she said finally. Ask me again in a month. Maybe I'll have an answer. Fair enough. He moved toward the door. I have work to finish. Stay as long as you want. Your room upstairs is ready if you don't want to ride back to the cabin tonight. After he left, Mara sat alone in the too large dining room and tried to understand what she'd just committed to. Not just a marriage, not just survival. Something harder and more terrifying, the possibility of actually building a life. She wasn't sure she remembered how to do that. Wasn't sure she had the strength left to try. But she was still here, still fighting, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Mara stayed that night in the guest room at the main house. And the next night. And the one after that. It wasn't a conscious decision so much as a gradual surrender to the fact that the cabin, for all its appeal, was brutally cold as autumn deepened into early winter. The main house had fires in multiple rooms, thick walls that held heat, and Helen's cooking. Practical reasons, she told herself, nothing more. But on the fourth morning, she came downstairs to find Rhett already at breakfast, reading a territorial newspaper someone had brought from the county seat. He looked up when she entered, and something in his expression shifted. Sleep all right? Better than I have in months. She poured coffee, sat across from him. Your house is warmer than the cabin. That's why I built it. He folded the paper. Helen mentioned you've been working on the mending, said you've finished everything I brought you, and more besides. I found more work in one of the storage rooms. Old clothes, worn blankets. Seemed wasteful to leave them. That storage room hasn't been touched in years. How'd you even find it? I was exploring. The house is large. I got curious. He studied her. You plan on staying here permanently, or is this temporary? The question should have made her defensive. Instead, she found herself considering it honestly. I don't know yet. The cabin feels like mine, but this house is more practical for winter. You could have both. Stay here during cold months, cabin when weather's better. That seems excessive. It seems practical. You just said as much yourself. Mara sipped her coffee, buying time. Rhett, what are we doing? Really? Having breakfast. You know what I mean. He set down his cup. I think we're figuring out how to exist in the same space without killing each other. So far, we're succeeding. That's a low bar. Start low, build up. That's how you construct anything that lasts. Helen came in with fresh biscuits, set them on the table without comment, and left. The woman had a gift for appearing and disappearing at precisely the right moments. I've been thinking, Mara said slowly, about what you said. Partnership, not charity. If that's true, I need actual work, not just mending old clothes. What kind of work? I don't know, something that contributes, that earns my keep. Rhett leaned back in his chair. The ranch operates on supply orders. Feed, equipment, tools. Currently, I manage all of it myself, along with accounts and payroll. It's getting to be too much. If you can read, write, and handle arithmetic, I could use help with the business side. I can do all three. Then you're hired, officially. Salary, same as I'd pay any clerk. I'm your wife. You don't have to pay me. That's exactly why I do have to pay you. Partnership means equal footing, and equal footing means you're compensated for work. His voice was firm. Besides, if this marriage dissolves, you'll need money of your own. This way you build savings regardless of what happens between us. The practicality of it caught her off guard. Most men would have assumed control of their wife's labor. Rhett was offering her independence within the structure they'd built. All right, she said. When do I start? After breakfast. I'll show you the ledgers. They worked together that morning in the study, Rhett explaining the ranch's operations while Mara took notes. The scope of his holdings surprised her, not just cattle, but investments in mining operations, partial ownership of a freight company, land scattered across 3 counties. "You're not just rich," she said, reviewing the accounts. "You're very rich." "I prefer financially stable." "That's not what these numbers say." "Fine, I'm wealthy. Does that change anything?" She thought about it. "It means you had even more to lose by marrying me. The council could have made your business life difficult. Still could. They can try. But money gives you options, and I've got enough to outlast their petty grudges." He pointed to a column of figures. "See this? Annual revenue from cattle sales. And this is operating costs. The difference is profit, which gets reinvested or saved." Mara studied the numbers. "Your profit margin is smaller than it should be." "What?" "These operating costs. You're overpaying for feed by about 15%, and these equipment purchases, you could get the same quality for less if you went through different suppliers." Rhett stared at her. "How do you know that?" "I ran a household on almost nothing for 20 years. You learn to spot waste." She pointed to another entry. "And this? You're paying premium prices for basic goods. There are bulk suppliers in Chicago who'd ship for half this cost. I've been using local suppliers to keep money in the community." "That's generous. Also expensive." She met his eyes. "You asked if I could help with accounts. This is me helping. You can keep using local suppliers if you want, but know that it's costing you real money." He was quiet for a moment, then he started to laugh. "Helen was right. You're either very smart or very desperate." "Both. I told you that." "Yeah, you did." He pulled over a fresh sheet of paper. "Show me. All of it. Every place you see waste or inefficiency." They worked through lunch, Helen bringing food they barely touched. Mara went through every account, every expense, every contract. Years of stretching pennies had taught her to see patterns, to spot where money leaked away in small, constant drips. By evening, she'd identified savings that would amount to thousands of dollars annually. Rhett sat back, looking dazed. "I've been running this ranch for 10 years. How did I miss all this?" "You were focused on the big picture, land acquisition, herd management, expansion. Nobody was watching the details." She closed the final ledger. "You need someone doing this full time. The business has gotten too large for one person to manage alone." "I have someone now. You." "I'm serious, Rhett. This is real work. It needs real commitment." "I'm serious too. You just showed me I've been hemorrhaging money for years. That's valuable. That's worth paying for." He stood, stretched. "We'll draw up a proper employment contract tomorrow. Salary, terms, everything official. For now, let's eat something that isn't cold." Over dinner, which they ate at the same end of the table this time, a small shift that felt significant, Rhett asked about her past. "You said you were married before. Briefly. 3 years. He was a good man. We were young, poor, hopeful. Then he got sick and died, and I was alone." "No family?" "My mother died when I was 16. Never knew my father, no siblings. My husband's family wanted nothing to do with me after he was gone." She pushed food around her plate. "I thought I could make it on my own. Turns out the world doesn't have much use for widows with no connections." "But you survived." "Barely. I moved from town to town, taking whatever sewing work I could find. Sometimes it was enough. Mostly it wasn't. I got older, got more desperate, until finally I was answering advertisements from men I'd never met, hoping one of them would see me as something other than a burden. And Brennan saw you as too small. Brennan saw me as useless. He wasn't wrong. I couldn't work a ranch, couldn't haul water or manage livestock or do any of the things he needed. I was exactly what he said, too small, too old, too worn out. You're not useless. I am at most things. I can sew, I can manage numbers, that's about it. That's more than most people can do. And you're learning the ranch business faster than any clerk I've hired." He paused. "You're not useless, Mara. You're just used to people treating you like you are. There's a difference." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, and they finished dinner in comfortable silence. That night, lying in the guest room that was starting to feel less like a guest room and more like her room, Mara stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what was happening. She'd come here expecting to die. Instead, she'd found work that mattered, a purpose beyond simple survival. It felt dangerous, like something that could be taken away. But for now, it was real. And maybe that was enough. The weeks that followed developed their own rhythm. Mara spent mornings working on accounts, afternoons on correspondence with suppliers and buyers. She reorganized the filing system, streamlined ordering processes, renegotiated contracts that had been running on autopilot for years. The work was exhausting and energizing in equal measure. For the first time in decades, she felt useful, necessary. Like her presence made a tangible difference, Rhett noticed. You've cut operating costs by 20% in a month. That's remarkable. That's basic competence. You were overpaying for everything. Still, it's making a difference. He handed her a bank draft. Your first month's salary, deposited in your name at the territorial bank. Mara stared at the paper. Her name, her money, legally hers, independent of anyone else. This is too much. It's what you've earned. Don't argue. But the money felt strange in her hands. She'd spent so long having nothing that having something felt like a trick, like it would vanish the moment she believed in it. She put the draft in a drawer and tried not to think about it. In early November, Martha Hendricks showed up at the main house. Mara was working in the study when Helen announced her. That Hendricks woman is here, wants to speak with you. Tell her I'm busy. I did. She says it's important. Mara set down her pen. Fine, send her in. Martha entered looking uncomfortable, hat in her hands. She sat when Mara gestured to a chair but perched on the edge like she might need to run. Mrs. Calder, thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Mrs. Hendricks? I wanted to apologize for how Ruth and I spoke to you, for the things we said. Mara waited. We were wrong. About you, about your arrangement with Mr. Calder. We judged without knowing, and that was unkind. Yes, it was. Martha twisted her hat. The thing is, my Ruth is engaged now, to a ranch hand from the Brennan place. We need someone who can do alterations on her wedding dress. The seamstress in town is terrible, and I heard you're skilled with sewing. So that was it. Not a real apology, a transaction. You want me to alter your daughter's wedding dress? I'd pay, of course, fair price. No. Martha looked up, startled. No? You came here to ask a favor from someone you treated like dirt. Someone you told to leave town. Someone you and your daughter called immoral and indecent. And you thought I'd just forget all that because you need something? Mrs. Calder, please, I said no. Find someone else. There is no one else. The nearest skilled seamstress is 2 days' ride away and we don't have time. That sounds like your problem, not mine. Martha stood, face red. I came here to apologize. You came here because you need something. There's a difference. Mara stood as well. You can leave now. After Martha left, sputtering with indignation, Mara sat back down and tried to feel victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. That evening, she told Rhett about it. Good, he said. Let them see what it costs to treat people like garbage. You don't think I should have helped her? Do you think you should have? I don't know. Part of me wanted to, just to be the bigger person. Being the bigger person is overrated. Sometimes people need to face consequences. Is that what this is? Consequences? It's reality. They made their choices. Now they live with them. He poured whiskey into 2 glasses, handed her one. You don't owe anyone forgiveness just because they decide they need something from you. Mara sipped the whiskey, felt it burn down her throat. When did you get so cynical? Around the same time, I realized being nice doesn't protect you from anything. It just makes you an easy target. That's bleak. That's honest. They sat in silence, drinking whiskey and watching the fire. But the next day, Mara found herself thinking about Ruth Hendricks, about being young and engaged, needing a dress altered, about how it must feel to have your mother come back empty-handed. She cursed herself for the weakness, but that afternoon she rode into town. Ruth was at the general store when Mara found her. The girl looked surprised, then wary. Mrs. Calder. Miss Hendricks, I hear you're getting married. I am, in 3 weeks. Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy. Ruth looked confused. Thank you? Your mother came to ask me to alter your wedding dress. I told her no. I know. She told me. I'm here to change my answer. Bring the dress to the ranch tomorrow. I'll do the alterations. Ruth's eyes widened. Really? Even after everything we said? Even after that? Consider it a wedding gift. Mara turned to leave, then stopped. But Ruth? Learn from this. Learn that treating people badly because you think they're beneath you has costs. Your mother had to swallow her pride to ask me for help. That's a price neither of you should have had to pay. She left before Ruth could respond. When she told Rhett that evening, he shook his head. You're too soft.
Maybe. Or maybe I'm just choosing who I want to be instead of letting them choose for me. What's that supposed to mean? It means if I refuse to help out of spite, I'm letting them make me bitter. I'm letting them win by making me smaller. If I help because I choose to, I stay in control of who I am. Rhett was quiet for a long moment. You're stronger than you think. I'm not strong, I'm just tired of being angry. Ruth brought the dress the next day, and Mara spent a week doing careful, precise work. The alterations were flawless, she made sure of that. Not for Ruth or Martha, but for herself. Because doing good work mattered, regardless of who benefited. When Ruth came to collect the dress, she brought payment, more than Mara had expected. It's too much, Mara said. It's what you're worth. Mother wanted to pay less, but I insisted. Ruth hesitated. Mrs. Calder, I'm sorry for what I said by the creek, for how I treated you. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't. I was raised to think certain things about women in your situation, that they were less. But you're not. I'm just a person doing my best with what I've got, same as everyone else. Ruth nodded. I'll remember that. After she left, Mara looked at the money in her hands and realized something had shifted. She wasn't that desperate woman on the train platform anymore. She was someone who had skills, who had value, who could choose to help or not help based on her own judgment. That realization felt like power. Winter came hard and fast. By December, snow lay thick on the ground and temperatures dropped low enough to make breathing hurt. Mara stayed at the main house full-time now, the cabin buried under drifts and inaccessible. She and Rhett fell into routines, working together in the study, eating meals at the same table, sitting by the fire in the evenings, sometimes talking, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't what she'd imagined marriage would be back when she was young and thought such things mattered. But it was real. And increasingly, it was enough. In January, a letter arrived from the territorial office. Rhett read it at breakfast, then handed it to Mara without comment. It was from the town council. A formal complaint alleging that Mara's employment with the ranch was fictitious, designed to circumvent vagrancy laws. They're still trying, Mara said. They're desperate. The council election is coming up. If they lose their power to harass people. Rhett took the letter back. We'll respond with employment records, pay receipts, everything documented. They won't have a leg to stand on. Will that stop them? Probably not, but it'll slow them down. The response took a week to compile. Mara gathered every piece of paperwork documenting her work, contracts she'd negotiated, accounts she'd reorganized, correspondence with suppliers. The evidence was overwhelming. They submitted it to the territorial office with a cover letter Rhett dictated, and Mara wrote in her precise hand. The response came in February. Complaint dismissed. Insufficient evidence of fraud. That night, they celebrated with whiskey and Helen's best cooking. It felt like victory. But the real victory came 2 weeks later, when 3 women from town showed up at the ranch. Helen announced them with barely concealed skepticism. There's women here to see you. Say they have business. Mara went to the parlor, found 3 women she recognized from town. The minister's wife, the schoolteacher, and a woman who ran a small bakery. Mrs. Calder, the minister's wife said, thank you for seeing us. What can I do for you? We've heard about your work. The wedding dress you altered for Ruth Hendricks. The accounts you manage for the ranch. The way you've established yourself. Mara waited. The schoolteacher spoke up. We're starting a women's cooperative for sewing, baking, teaching. A way for women to earn independent income. We'd like you to join us. It was so unexpected that Mara couldn't process it for a moment. You want me to join your cooperative? We do. Your skills would be valuable, and frankly, your example has been inspiring. My example? You came here with nothing, the bakery owner said. You faced rejection, scorn, legal harassment. You could have given up, left town. Instead, you built something. You made yourself necessary. That's the kind of determination we need. Mara looked at these three women, respectable, established, everything she wasn't. The town thinks I'm a con artist who trapped a rich man into marriage. Some people think that. Others see a woman who refused to let circumstances destroy her. The minister's wife leaned forward. Mrs. Calder, we're not asking you to be perfect or proper. We're asking you to teach us how to survive when the world decides we're not worth the trouble. The honesty of it struck something deep in Mara's chest. I don't know how to teach that. You're living it. That's teaching enough. She joined the cooperative the following week. The first meeting was awkward. Some women were wary, others openly hostile. But Mara showed them her ledgers, explained how she'd reorganized the ranch accounts, demonstrated techniques for invisible mending and precise alterations. By the third meeting, the hostility had faded into grudging respect. By the sixth meeting, 2 more women had joined. The cooperative grew. Within months, they were taking orders from across the territory: custom sewing, baked goods for special occasions, tutoring for children whose families lived too far from town for regular schooling. Mara found herself at the center of it, not because she'd sought leadership, but because the other women looked to her for guidance. She'd survived what they feared most: being cast out, deemed worthless, forced to rebuild from nothing. And she'd done more than survive. She'd built something that mattered. Spring came, and with it, the town council elections. The old council lost badly, swept out by voters tired of petty tyranny. The new council's first act was to formally welcome Mrs. Rhett Calder as a valued member of the community. Mara read the proclamation and laughed until tears ran down her face. "What's funny?" Rhett asked. "They're welcoming me. The same people who tried to run me out 6 months ago are now claiming me as one of their own. That's politics, short memory, convenient principles. It's absurd. It's victory. Take it." That evening, they sat on the porch of the main house watching the sun set over land that was greening up after the long winter. The air was warm, carrying the smell of new grass and distant rain. "I've been thinking," Rhett said. "Dangerous habit. This marriage, this arrangement, it's worked out better than I expected. That's a low bar. You expected disaster. I expected functional coexistence. We got something better." Mara looked at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should make this permanent. Not just legal, but real." Her stomach tightened. Define real. Partnership. Not just business, but actual partnership. Building a life together instead of just coexisting in the same space. We already do that. We do it while pretending it's temporary. I'm suggesting we stop pretending. Mara was quiet for a long time. "You know I'm never going to be what people expect. I'm too old, too worn down, too broken in too many ways. I don't want what people expect. I want what works. And this," he gestured between them, "this works. Even though I still plan exit strategies, even though that, everyone should have exit strategies. It's smart planning. Even though I'm not in love with you, even though that, love is overrated. Respect, partnership, shared purpose, those matter more." She thought about the past 6 months, the way they'd built something together without planning to, the way her work had become real work, her presence necessary instead of tolerated, the way she'd stopped feeling like a burden and started feeling like a partner. "All right," she said finally. "All right? All right, let's make it permanent. Real partnership, not just legal arrangement." Rhett smiled, real and warm. "Yeah? Yeah, but I'm keeping my own bank account. Wouldn't have it any other way." They sat in silence as the sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and deep blue. "Rhett?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for staying when you could have left." The cooperative flourished through summer. By fall, they'd outgrown the small building they'd been using and moved into a larger space Rhett helped them lease. The women, now 23 of them, pooled resources, shared knowledge, supported each other through hardships. Mara taught them everything she knew about managing money, about negotiating prices, about making themselves indispensable. She showed them how to build leverage from skills, how to demand fair payment, how to refuse to accept less than they deserved. And slowly, steadily, the women of Smoke Creek Station became a force in the local economy. Businesses that had ignored them now sought their services. Men who'd dismissed them now depended on their expertise. The shift was subtle, but undeniable. Power had redistributed, and the women held more of it. One evening in October, almost a year after Mara had stepped off that train, she stood in the cooperative building watching women work. Seamstresses bent over fabric, bakers kneaded dough, teachers prepared lessons. The room hummed with productivity and purpose. Ruth Hendricks, now Ruth Morrison, approached with a question about pricing alterations. She was pregnant, glowing, happy in a way that made Mara feel ancient and young at the same time. "Mrs. Calder, what do you think is fair for this kind of work?" Mara examined the dress in question, calculated time and skill required. "Charge what it's worth, not what you think people will pay. If they balk, that's their problem." "That seems harsh. That's survival. You want to eat next winter? You charge what the work is worth." Ruth nodded, taking the advice seriously. She'd learned. They all had. After Ruth left, the minister's wife came over. "The cooperative is talking about expansion, maybe a second location in the county seat. We'd need someone to manage it." "I can't be in two places at once." "We weren't thinking of you. We were thinking of Margaret Spencer. She's been with us since the beginning, has good business sense. But we'd want your approval." The fact that they were asking, that they valued her opinion enough to seek approval, still surprised Mara. "If you think she can handle it, I trust your judgment." "We learned that from you, trusting our own judgment instead of waiting for permission." After everyone left and Mara was locking up, she stood in the empty building and let herself acknowledge the truth. She'd built something that would outlast her. The cooperative would continue whether she was part of it or not. She'd taught these women to be self-sufficient, and they'd learned. That felt like legacy, like the opposite of useless. At home, and the main house was home now, fully and completely, she found Rhett in the study working on accounts. He looked up when she entered. "How'd it go?" "Good. They want to expand." "That's excellent. You must be proud." "I am. Also terrified they won't need me anymore." "They'll always need you, just in different ways as they grow." He set down his pen. "Kind of like us." "What do you mean?" "We started out needing each other for survival. Now we need each other for different reasons, better reasons." Mara sat in the chair across from him. "What reasons?" "Company, partnership, someone to argue with about accounting practices. Those are terrible reasons. They're honest reasons," he smiled. "How's that for not lying?" She smiled back. "It'll do." They sat in comfortable silence, and Mara realized this was what she'd been searching for without knowing it. Not romance, not rescue, just this: respect, partnership, shared purpose. A place where her presence mattered and her absence would be felt. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she'd answered Thomas Brennan's advertisement. It was better, harder, messier, more complicated, but real in ways that imagined life had never been. Winter came again, and with it Mara's first anniversary as Mrs. Rhett Calder. They didn't celebrate with fanfare, just a quiet dinner, good whiskey, and acknowledgement that they'd made it a full year without destroying each other. "To survival," Rhett said, raising his glass. "To partnership," Mara countered. They drank, and the whiskey was smooth and warming. "You know what I realized?" Mara said. "What's that?" "Thomas Brennan did me a favor, rejecting me on that platform." "How do you figure?" "If he'd gone through with the marriage, I'd be stuck on some remote ranch doing work I couldn't handle, married to a man who saw me as inadequate. Instead, I'm here, running a business, leading a cooperative, married to someone who actually values what I contribute. So rejection was the best thing that could have happened." "Maybe. Or maybe I just got lucky when Rhett Calder decided to play hero." "I wasn't playing hero. I was being practical." "You were being kind. There's a difference." He was quiet for a moment. Charlie used to say that kindness and practicality weren't opposites, that being kind was practical because it built the kind of world you'd want to live in. Smart man. He was. I think he'd have liked you. Yeah? Yeah, you've got that same stubborn refusal to quit, that same ability to survive things that should have broken you. Mara thought about the woman who'd stepped off the train a year ago, desperate, terrified, planning to walk into wilderness and not come back. That woman felt like a stranger now. "I'm not that person anymore," she said quietly. "Who are you now?" She thought about it. Someone who builds things, someone who matters, someone who took the worst moment of her life and turned it into something worth having.
That's exactly who you are. They sat by the fire until late, talking about plans for the ranch, for the cooperative, for the life they were building together. Not perfect, not smooth, but theirs, earned through hard work and stubborn refusal to accept the world's judgment. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, warmth and light and the sound of two people who'd found in each other exactly what they needed, even if it wasn't what they'd expected. Mara had learned something in her year in Wyoming. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen is actually a door opening. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes losing everything makes space for building something better. She'd been discarded, dismissed, declared worthless by people who thought they had the right to make such judgments. And she'd proven every single one of them wrong. Not through force, not through vengeance, but through the simple, stubborn act of refusing to disappear, of building value where none had existed, of turning survival into victory through nothing more than work, intelligence, and absolute refusal to accept the role the world had assigned her. The rejected bride had become the backbone of a thriving ranch and a businesswoman respected across the territory. The woman dismissed as too small, too old, too useless, had built a cooperative that employed dozens and generated real economic power. The world had tried to break her. She'd broken the world's expectations instead. And in doing so, she'd discovered something fundamental. Worth isn't something you're born with or something others grant you. It's something you build, piece by piece, through the work you do and the choices you make, and the absolute refusal to let anyone else define your value. That was the lesson. That was the truth. And as Mara sat by the fire in a house that had become home, married to a man who'd become partner, leading a cooperative that had become purpose, she finally understood she wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. And that made all the difference.